Okay. All right, we are live. Lysandra.
Okay, thank you. So, welcome to this week's episode of What's the Tea? We want you guys to come on and join us. Make sure you share this video with your followers. We are spilling the tea today with Carol Gazelle, who's our very own Associate Director at South Suburban Family Shelter. So she's going to be spilling the tea on some of what makes our program so successful at the agency. Some of you know we're celebrating 40 years of providing domestic violence services in the community. And so Carol has played a pretty integral leadership role at the organization for some years now. So she's going to talk about that. And so go ahead, join us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I've got my tea here today. I've got some green tea. You guys can grab your tea while you're coming in and joining us. Carol, you got it?
My tea.
We're set with our tea. So you guys can grab your tea and come on and join us. And so again, South Suburban Family Shelter has a What's the Tea episode every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. One of our staff members will interview someone else from the organization, and we highlight the work that we're doing. We let you get a chance to get to know some of the staff and some of the inner workings of the organization. So we're talking today, and we hope that you join us again next week at 1 o'clock. So go ahead and share this video, and we're going to get into our interview with Carol. Okay, so Carol, thank you for doing this.
Sure, no problem.
It's not the most comfortable position to have the people that are working behind the scenes have to be in front of the camera. So
no, it's not my forte.
It's a leap, but we appreciate you being a part of this.
Sure.
And so we want to let people get to know you and who you are. You have an amazing, really multifaceted background in a lot of where you've worked in a lot of different capacities and industries. And I know you bring a lot of that background and experience to your work at South Suburban Family Shelter. So if you could just let us know a little bit about your background, educationally, professionally, and what brought you to your work at South Suburban Family Shelter.
Sure. It's been a pretty meandering path across 4 different states and a variety of different backgrounds and settings that I've worked in. I have my undergraduate in psychology with a minor in criminal justice, and I have my master's in mental health counseling. I am currently an LCPC, which is a licensed clinical professional counselor, and a CDVP, certified domestic violence professional, and a CPAPE, certified partner abuse intervention professional. That makes me sound like all something, but let me back up a little bit. So I started out in criminal justice and worked in a juvenile criminal justice setting for a few years. And then at some point I went back and got my master's and ended up doing counseling for both adults and children. Absolutely loved working with children and being a children's counselor. That was really where I think my heart was for many, many years. Then when we moved to a different state, then I ended up working for a corporate America and moved into managed care. Did that for some years, and through all of those experiences, I feel like the clients that I worked with had been impacted by domestic violence on a variety of different levels in a variety of different ways. And my master's program didn't really have much about domestic violence, so there wasn't a lot of training about it, way back. We won't say when I got my master's, but a few years ago. And so when this opportunity came up for me to move in with my experiences to work in the counseling program as the counseling coordinator at that time, I just felt like it was a really important move for me to be able to make, to take what I had learned to maybe help the agency, but also for the agency to really give me that opportunity to learn what I could about domestic violence and kind of blend all of that together. And so I joined the South Suburban Family Shelter team in May of 2008.
Wow. Wow. So it's been about 12 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
hmm
Um, so that's amazing. And what were those different states that you worked in again?
I worked in Ohio, California, Montana, and Illinois.
Okay. But your work at South Suburban Family Shelter, is this your first domestic violence specific?
Yes.
Was that your first? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we had a conversation last week where I was letting you know, there was an article that I read about tri-sector leadership and how it was important to have leaders who had experiences in various sectors and could work across sectors to kind of understand like a bird's eye view of how systems work together, how different sectors work together, how different parts work together. And I feel like you bring that to this position, and it really informs the work that you do as really the manager of the managers. So can you talk more about your role specifically at South Suburban Family Shelter? What do you do as the associate director, and how do you approach it? What's your goal?
My role is really to work with the different departments. So there are 7 different departments that I work very collaboratively with that provide some level of direct client services. That includes the medical advocacy program, court advocacy, counseling for both the adults and the children impacted by domestic violence, hotline and crisis intervention, the housing program, which is the transitional housing program and also the rapid rehousing program, the PAPE program, partner abuse intervention, and also community education. And that seems like a lot when you lay it out that way. It doesn't necessarily feel that way when I'm actually in my work on a day-to-day basis. I have an amazing group of managers that I have the privilege to be able to work with. And so I know that the goal today is kind of to highlight what I do. However, I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it wasn't for this amazing group of individuals that really are partnering with me to make sure that any work that I'm doing for the organization really translates down into better services for our clients. So we really work on 3 different areas. The first one is really making sure that there is consistency across the different programs. Really want to make sure that, our clients come in the door a variety of different ways and they cross into different programs. The majority of clients don't just necessarily come in and seek one service. So they might, through the life that they've spent with South Suburban Family Shelter, they might have had impact with our hotline. They might have needed a brief stay in emergency shelter. They might have needed assistance obtaining an order of protection or understanding what their rights are in the court system. They might have decided that they really wanted to take some more time to look at how domestic violence has impacted their lives and have sought counseling for themselves or for their children. They might have had some sort of a housing crisis or a financial crisis, and we were able to help them with that. So the idea that we can blend all the services as much as possible by having consistency in how we approach them, consistency, making sure that all of our services are client-centered and trauma-informed, really is one of the main focuses that we do when looking across the programs. Okay. The second part of what we really focus on is ensuring that we have a really collaborative management team so that they are building strong relationships and strong partnerships across the different programs. At one point, the agency had a different management style. And so each program was a little bit on its own. And through the years, the agency realized that this might not be the best approach because of that idea that clients touch so many programs. Right. And so the agency did some restructuring so that we really could have a better cross collaboration across the programs and across the management team. And I think that when we have a strong management team, I think that just really strengthens what we're able to provide to our clients. And then the third area that we really focus on is probably not as glamorous as exciting, and that really is making sure that we stay in compliance with federal, state, and funding guidelines, making sure that confidentiality and privacy of our clients is utmost in our thoughts, utmost in our processes and our procedures at all times, and really making sure that we are working towards improving our services, working towards established outcome measures that we have set as the benchmarks for each one of the programs.
Okay. Awesome. So you talked a little bit about like the importance of ensuring that the programs work collaboratively. What are some ways that you facilitate that process in which you help the managers collaborate? Or have you seen challenges like with the COVID-19 pandemic that maybe made that reality, the fact that they needed to collaborate, even more prevalent? And how did you work together with them to mitigate maybe some of the challenges that arose?
I think that to highlight that really is to probably give some examples, and I think that there's so many examples of how the programs really work collaboratively together. One of them is the fact that in our transitional housing program, we have one of our counseling staff whose office is at our transitional housing program, so that she can ensure that she is there to meet the client's needs when it comes to just processing everything that they've faced with the combination of facing homelessness and facing domestic violence. Lysandra, I saw your interview that you were talking about the Southside Connections, and that definitely is a partnership between, the counseling department and, the community education program, along with another organization. I think, so again, there's opportunities and there's success stories for our agency about how we really have been able to have this collaborative spirit. I think one of the recent ones, sorry, my earbuds were falling out there. One of the recent ones, when you bring up COVID, that I think just really highlights the strength of our programs and the professionalism of our managers, is that when COVID hit at the same time that we had the shelter in place order, as we've talked about as an agency and as a community, that the rate of domestic violence did not decrease, right? It actually increased. And what that meant for our agency was this unbelievable surge of clients needing our emergency shelter. And once they got there, then there was really a struggle for us to be able to help them move on to the next stage of their life. A lot of domestic violence agencies were struggling to be able to accept someone into a longer term program. Housing programs were really struggling to be able to provide longer term housing opportunities for individuals that were in emergency shelter. And so what the management team saw was that the emergency shelter staff, crisis intervention staff, were really having to extend their resources. And there was a lot on this staff to be able to provide. And so the management team stepped in and said, how can we support? How can we help? So our counseling staff started to provide telephonic services, remote services for the individuals that were in emergency shelter, so that they could get some support and they could get some a safe place for them to process and to vent and for them to feel heard. Yeah. Our housing staff and our case management staff stepped in and said, how can we support the crisis intervention staff with finding longer term solutions for these individuals that are in a holding pattern in emergency shelter? And so they were able to work collaboratively with the crisis intervention staff to find housing options for the individuals so that they didn't have to stay with us. And they could move on with the next phase of their life. So that really was something that I felt was a real highlight of where our agency has gotten to in this idea of collaborative spirit. I think the managers really see the clients that are served at South Suburban Family Shelter as a collective whole, and not necessarily just, well, those are my clients and those are your clients. That's not how they think. That's not how they operate.
I think that's amazing. I think that it speaks to the fact that if there had not been a collaborative spirit already in place, then when the crisis hit, the counselors in the other departments, right? Do you think that they would have been able to even have the mindset to jump in so quickly? How important do you think having had that collaborative culture in place allowed you guys to easily move into a smooth process to address this crisis?
I think it's everything. I really do. Most programs, most individuals really thrive when they have an understanding of what their role is and what the structure is around them. Right. And what this agency has really worked on is the idea that, yes, there is a role, there is a structure, but here are some times if you feel secure enough in that role and in that structure, then when the need arises for you to step outside of the box and create a different path, then you feel comfortable being able to do that. And I really feel like the management staff were at a place where when someone had the idea of, well, what if, they went, yeah, what if? Let's try it.
Wow.
You know?
Wow. So that really speaks to how secure they feel in the role that they're playing. And like you said, it gives them the confidence to be able to step out and to meet the need, because there was a great need that allowed the organization to continue to thrive.
Right.
In the midst of this challenging time. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how do you, and we talked a little bit about this last week, what is your style to supporting the managers in their role? More specifically, what do you say to them, or how do you are you a coach, or do you give advice? How do you approach that role?
Probably a little bit of everything. When I think about management, we talk a lot among our team about the fact that there's basically two different hats that managers have to wear, especially in a social service environment. So not only do they have their administrator hat on, right? And that's the one that is, did you get your timesheets in on time? What are the policies and procedures? Are the staff following them? What forms need to be revised? Are we meeting our outcome measures? Those kind of black and white pieces to business. And then I think the other hat that we have to wear is the supervision hat. And I think my philosophy is that it's my role to support my managers into growing into their potential, so that they can then turn around and support their staff so that the staff can grow into their potential. I don't know what else to say at the moment about that.
I think that's clear. And I think that it clearly shows the fruit of that work has shown through the ways that, well, personally as staff, as a member of the staff, I definitely feel it on the education team, that my manager feels supported and it trickles down. It trickles down into our day-to-day functions and the way we function in our position. the way we feel like there is just a set level of leadership, and we know where we're going and what's expected of us. So I think
I think I truly believe that the strength of the leadership translates to the strengths and resiliency of the agency.
Absolutely. So I think this is an important interview. It's different from the other ones that we've done, but I think it's important because, like you said, when you understand that there's a strong structure in place, that there is that the leadership capacity of the managers and the people that are leading an organization, that there's a flow, there's a goal, there's a mission, there's a shared vision, and the work is being done to make sure that all of that is sustainable. It really speaks to the longevity of our agency.
Right, absolutely.
So Zach, we want to go to the chat and see if there's any questions.
All right, we don't have any questions so far, so I think we'll just remind everyone to ask a few questions for us and give them just a minute and see.
Absolutely. You guys can feel free to, if you have any questions about the agency, about South Suburban Family Shelter, or if you have any questions for Carol specifically or myself, please feel free to drop them in the chat.
So, Lysandra, we had talked a little bit about the idea of that when you bring different experiences from different settings into your role, I really believe that very strongly, that it really has allowed me, and I think anyone in the same kind of situation, to be able to view the world and view services with a different lens on, right? Yeah. So the idea that, when I started in criminal justice, my first exposure were with individuals that were incarcerated, adults that were incarcerated. And then from there, I went into working with youth that had been incarcerated. And right there, that gives you an interesting perspective of what a path could be if we didn't figure out how to divert these youth that were incarcerated into better choices within their lives, right? And then being able to go back and obtain my master's and start working in the counseling field just brought a whole new perspective to it, right? Then we really are looking at that ability to then meet someone where they are and talk to them about, well, I talk about this with, in counseling a lot, and it's a really bad analogy. I'm very well known for my very bad analogies. You know what I mean? That myself and my client are in a car, they're in the driver's seat, but I've got the map. And when we get to a crossroads, then we can have that conversation as far as, well, if you go left, this is what it might look like. And if we go right, this is what it might look like. Your life, your choice, which way do you want to go? And so then I think that being able to have that experience and then moving into corporate, where now you really are talking about the bottom line, right? You're talking about what is the dollar amount that gets associated with services. I think all of that just allows individuals to have that holistic view.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming back to that point, because that was something we wanted to talk a little bit more about, because you bring the private sector, really like the private sector, the public sector, and the nonprofit sector, you bring a breadth of knowledge to your role. And I think that speaks to just like the ability to lead and be able to look at, like you said, the management, the grants, the criteria that need to be met, but then also the people, understanding how all this then impacts real people's lives on the day-to-day. So I want to thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really important. And I think it's important for any organization or any agency or anyone doing anything to really understand all of those different parts and how it trickles down to impact a real life, somebody's real life.
Right. And I think that kind of translates to that idea of the collaborative spirit, right? Is because we as humans tend to look at the world through our own lens, right? Our own lens as far as our experience, our own lens based off of what our role is, whatever that may be. And so then when we as a management team can look at client services from the various different viewpoints, then I think that just gives our services strength. You know? And just the idea that our agency not only provides services to people impacted by domestic violence as a victim or survivor of domestic violence, but also those who choose to use violence within their relationships or abuse within their relationships. We've got both teams sitting at the table so that we are able to look at this from not a one-sided lens, but, you know, my husband would be disappointed because there's a specific type of lens that I should know that, you know, the lenses that you have in panoramic. I was thinking about, like, you know, the lighthouses, you know what I mean, where there's a very specific lens. I learned it on my vacation this year. And the idea that this team it's funneling all of this light, all of these views, you know what I mean? So that we are able to take everything and we're able to point it towards the best services possible. You know, I think that's important.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of just organizational leadership in general. And I think it's actually a model that could be applied to so many different industries, organizations. When we talked, I told you how I compared your role to motherhood in many ways. There's 7 different.
Not sure my staff would agree with that, but yeah.
All the different aspects of the bigger picture and the bigger, almost like household, you know?
Right. And then having the flexibility that I think it's important, just like, you know, when you're a parent, it is, you know, what is the crisis of the moment? You know, what is the situation that has presented itself as you're moving along? You know, where does your focus need to shift to quickly to resolve that, so that you can go back to what is the bigger picture, and having that ability to move in and out of, you know, micro to macro.
Yeah, this is so great. There's so much value in hearing your unique perspective, because you're from the place that you're viewing how everything is being implemented and organized, so that all the services do remain client-centered, while we also meet the demands and the requirements of the funding that we receive, the support that we're receiving. So awesome. I wanted to go back to Zach and see if there were any questions in the chat yet.
Yes, and it's really funny. I think Carol was mind reading, because exactly what you were just speaking about is kind of one of the questions that came up, which was, how do you ensure that programs are being trauma informed in their everyday work? And it's just kind of, if you had anything else to say along with that.
I think what's also important of an organization and also of management is that we never stop learning, that we always challenge ourselves to improve. And so I think that that's part of the idea of ensuring that we are trauma informed is, you know, that language was not something that was used 25, 30 years ago, right? The idea of it might have been, but not that language. And so when we use that now, it really is making sure that we understand exactly what that looks like and what does it mean for our clients at this moment, right? How do we look at our clients holistically and understand that domestic violence is a part of their experience, but is not the totality of who they are. And that they come with a variety of different experiences, which might have been traumatic for them, that adds to the layers of who they are. And so I think being very mindful of ensuring that we're providing clients with experiences and with supportive services that really see them as the total of who they are, I think is also something that's extremely important for us as a domestic violence agency.
And for those viewers that may not fully understand what trauma-informed means, you're already kind of saying it, but can you just kind of unpack a little bit more about how you would define that term?
Sure. So trauma-informed is understanding that individuals are coming to services because they have gone through a traumatic experience. And that trauma, the same trauma will impact someone in a variety of different ways and will impact 10 people in a variety of different ways based off of what other traumas that they have experienced in their lives, based off of what resiliency they have built into their coping mechanisms, based off of, do they have healthy coping mechanisms that might not be as healthy for them, all of that together. And so ensuring that the way that we provide the services, which includes how do we answer the phone? How do we greet them at the door? How do we set up the environment, the physical environment when they're coming into a space? How do we ask them to do the very lengthy assessment paperwork? You know what I mean? All of that, having a trauma-informed lens on it, means that we're consciously aware of how our services can support them, or can negatively impact how they're receiving services from them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the best advices that I got when I was in my master's program was that it's our role as a provider, as a counselor, advocate, whatever that may be, to set up the person that's coming behind us, right? So what experience I provide to a client is going to help them decide whether they feel safe enough and secure enough to receive services in the future, right? Because the services that we provide are a moment in their lives, and they might need to have the opportunity to go in and out of services depending on what life brings to them. And so we really want to make sure that we're providing a safe and confidential and supportive environment with that idea of that trauma-informed lens, so that they can get what they need now, but are more willing to come back in the future.
Wow, I love that perspective. That's really good. That's really insightful. Zach, are there other questions in the chat?
Yes, we have 3 more questions if you have time. I'll start with the one.
Bring it on.
Yeah, that's awesome. The one that's most related to what we're talking about, and then I'll go to the other 2. So in your experience with partner abuse, do you find that they also experience trauma, not as an excuse for their behavior, but is their history indicative of the abuse?
I wouldn't say a global that every person that has been in a PAPE program has also had a history of childhood trauma. No more than I would say that about victim services. But I would say that there is a high preponderance of individuals that come into a PAPE program with having experienced a variety of different traumas. That might have been childhood traumas. It might have been traumas later in life. It's when I have provided had the opportunity to be a PAPE co-facilitator, it never ceases to amaze me how individuals bring up an experience and as just normative without realizing that this by other people might have been perceived as being a traumatic experience. So they often come in with exposure to community violence, whether that has been violent deaths, whether that has been just violence overall. They often come in with disruptive family environments where they've been not necessarily having the Ozzie and Harriet perfect, family environment where, they've had periods of homelessness. They've had periods of food shortages, support shortages, all of those other kind of things. So yes, just, I would definitely say that that's also very important for us in the PAPE program is to recognize that and to help them recognize it. But as you say, to explain but not excuse.
Yeah.
Right? It might help them develop into what their beliefs are and what their patterns are, but it certainly does not excuse their choice to use abuse within a relationship. And that's that important piece that the PAPE facilitators bring to the table.
Awesome. No, that's really good insight.
Okay.
And Carol, let me make this point too. You talked about all the different certifications that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Are those required for the associate director position, or did you just happen to?
And nothing else to do. No, actually, they are required. I happily have them.
Yeah.
I think it's been important in my professional and personal growth to be able to have these certifications. But the agency, the way that it's currently structured, there are two roles that are required to be duly certified in CDVP and CPAPE, and that is myself, and that is also the community education manager who is in charge of our 40-hour training and our 20-hour training. So she also has to be duly certified.
Okay, thank you. Zach, we're going to go on to the next question from the chat.
Okay. It's more of a two-part question. It's about switching over and talking about COVID. So how has COVID affected the medical advocates specifically, and also how have the respective departments bounced back as a whole?
So the medical advocacy program was just halted in their tracks. They really, appropriately, they were asked not to come back into the medical facilities at the moment, right? To ensure that there is safety for themselves and also safety for any patients that are seen in a medical facility. So that has meant that we've really had to start looking at what can this program become? And we had, the medical advocacy manager and I had already started having some conversations about if we could, dream and create this program into anything that we wanted it to look like, what would that be? And so, again, because we had that ability to kind of dream ahead of time, ahead of COVID, then I felt like we were in a better place for us to start moving forward on what an action plan could be. And so at this moment, the medical advocacy program is in a very collaborative environment with our development team and our community education team to reevaluate how can we provide community outreach, how can we provide education for the public, and one-touch education and support for individuals impacted by domestic violence in a variety of different settings besides just the medical community.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen with COVID. We don't know how long this is going to last, But we do know that what the medical advocates bring to our program and bring to the community is so vital that we are not willing for it just to go away. So we are invigorating it, reinventing it, keeping what is strength there, and looking at how we can do medical advocacy 2.0. And then the other part of the question was, how has the other programs bounced back? That's an interesting phrase. I think we're still bouncing.
Right.
We're trying to figure out what this looks like. So it's that idea of how can we collectively as an agency look at how can we provide services during COVID, and then how does that translate into services for each one of the different departments? And each department is taking on that challenge a little bit differently. Yeah. The counseling department is trying something that is completely new for us, and that is providing telehealth services, yeah, whether that is telephonic or whether that is through an online platform. The PAPE program is also looking at and is providing those services in that same format, which is completely different and really challenges us to look at how we meet our clients' needs in a different manner. The court advocacy program is as busy as they have always been, and for them to really look at what is a safe way in order for them to meet their clients and serve them. And by that, I mean physically safe, right? Because the courthouse is still open and they're still able to come in and receive services for obtaining an order protection. So again, I think each program is still figuring it out. And we've done some amazing brainstorming at the management level for us to be able to keep moving. Yeah, you know, COVID has been a bump in the road. It's been a very large bump in the road, but it has not stopped us, right? Yeah. We just go slowly over it and then keep moving forward.
Yeah. That's awesome. Zach, is there another question?
That will be it for the question, so I'll let you take it back over.
Okay, thank you so much. So Carol, you know, as we wrap up, I just want to say that I feel like your passion to make sure that the programs persevere, even through such an uncertain time and so many different challenges, it comes across even in the way you talk about it, in the way you speak about it. Where does that passion come from? How have you been able to sustain it during this time?
I think that passion is directly related to the clients that we serve. And I don't say this lightly, but you know, I've been asked, I think many people in the field of domestic violence have been asked, well, how can you do that? Why are you still there? Isn't that hard? And yeah, most jobs are hard, you know, in some way, but to me, it is the strength and the perseverance of our clients in both sides, you know, that what they have within them that they don't even recognize yet is an amazing privilege for us to be able to help them see that and help them make movement in their life towards a healthier place and towards what they want their life to look like. That's been a gift that to me just keeps on giving, you know? And so I don't see myself as, look what I can do for you. Mm-hmm. It really is, how have all of the individuals that I've had the privilege of having communicated with, how have they enriched my life? And so I hope that we have been able to enrich their life also. And so I think that that's where that really comes from.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we end the interview?
Can't think of anything at the moment.
You said a lot of great stuff. So
My deodorant's still working. We're good. Woo!
we did it. I just want to thank you. Thank you to everyone that has tuned in to What's the Tea this week. We appreciate you for spending this time with us. We encourage you to please like, love, share this video with those that you know that this will impact and who can benefit from this information. And we hope that you join us next week at 1 p.m. We'll be back with another episode of What's the Tea.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Carol.
Mm-hmm.